This wasn't supposed to exist. Hidden beneath the surface of the internet, beyond Google, beyond law enforcement, beyond the reach of normal society, there was a marketplace. A marketplace where identity meant nothing. A marketplace where money moved silently. A marketplace where the darkest desires of humanity could be fulfilled, without consequence. This was Silk Road, and its creator believed he was building freedom, but what he actually created was something far more dangerous. Because when you remove identity, when you remove accountability, when you remove fear, you reveal the true nature of human beings. And what emerged from Silk Road wasn't just illegal trade, it was the blueprint of a hidden economy. An economy powered by anonymity. An economy powered by desperation. An economy powered by control. To understand Silk Road, you need to understand one thing first. The internet you use every day is not the real internet. What you see on Google, YouTube, Instagram, that's the surface. Less than 5%. Beneath it lies the deep web. And beneath that lies the dark web. A place intentionally hidden. A place where users cannot be easily traced. A place where identities disappear. And in 2011, one man decided to build a marketplace there. His name was Ross Ulbricht. He wasn't a criminal, he wasn't a gangster. He was a normal, educated, intelligent young man. He believed in freedom. Freedom from government control. Freedom from surveillance. Freedom from financial systems. He believed people should be able to buy and sell anything, without interference. So he built Silk Road, and at first it was small, unknown, invisible. But Silk Road had two powerful weapons, anonymity and Bitcoin. Bitcoin was new, untraceable, uncontrolled, perfect for anonymous transactions. And slowly, Silk Road began to grow. First hundreds of users, then thousands, then hundreds of thousands. Money began flowing, millions of dollars, then tens of millions. Silk Road became the Amazon of the dark web. Anything could be bought, anything could be sold, drugs, fake identities, hacking tools, illegal services, everything. But something else was happening, something darker. Because Silk Road didn't just create a marketplace, it created a system where morality no longer mattered, only money mattered, only anonymity mattered, and when people realized they could act without consequences, they began crossing lines they never would in the real world. Because anonymity removes fear. And when fear disappears, control disappears, law disappears, humanity disappears. Behind screens, behind encryption, behind fake names, people became something else. Vendors built empires, buyers built addictions, millions flowed through invisible channels. Law enforcement couldn't stop it. They couldn't see it. They couldn't track it. Because Silk Road wasn't just a website. It was an idea, and ideas are harder to destroy. As Silk Road grew, it attracted more attention, more users, more money, more power. Ross Ulbricht became known as Dread Pirate Roberts, a hidden identity, a digital king. He controlled everything, the servers, the money, the system. He believed he was creating freedom, but power changes people slowly, silently, irreversibly. Because when you control a system worth millions, you stop being just a creator. You become something else. You become responsible for everything inside it. Every transaction, every deal, every crime. And Silk Road was no longer small. It was massive. Over 1 million users, billions in transactions, a global underground economy. And governments began to panic because they realized something terrifying. They were losing control. For the first time in history, a global black market existed beyond their reach. No borders, no banks, no oversight, just code and anonymity. Law enforcement agencies launched investigations. The FBI, the DEA cybercrime units. They all tried to find Silk Road. But Silk Road was built to survive. Encrypted, hidden, protected. Every layer designed to resist discovery. And for years, it worked. Silk Road operated freely, growing stronger, growing richer, growing more dangerous, because Silk Road proved something. Control was no longer physical, control was digital, and whoever controlled the system controlled everything. But every system has a weakness, and Silk Road had one too. Its creator was human, and humans make mistakes. Small mistakes, invisible mistakes, but mistakes that leave traces. Ross Ulbricht believed he was invisible, but he wasn't, because the internet never forgets. Every action leaves a trail, every decision leaves evidence, and slowly, investigators began connecting pieces, tiny clues, tiny cracks, until finally, they found him. October 1st, 2013. Ross Ulbricht was sitting in a public library, working on his laptop, running Silk Road, controlling millions, living a double life, and then it ended. FBI agents surrounded him, seized his laptop, seized Silk Road, seized everything. The invisible empire collapsed instantly. Ross Ulbricht was arrested. Silk Road was shut down. The king was gone. The system was destroyed, or so they thought. Because Silk Road wasn't just a website, it was proof. Proof that control could be broken, proof that anonymity could create power, proof that hidden economies could exist. And even after Silk Road died, its idea survived. New marketplaces appeared, stronger, smarter, more dangerous. Because once the system is created, it cannot be erased, only replaced. Today, the dark web still exists, hidden, active, growing. Silk Road didn't end the dark web, it gave birth to it. And the most terrifying truth is this. Silk Road showed the world what happens when humans operate without identity. Without accountability, without fear, because behind anonymity, people reveal who they really are, not who society wants them to be, not who laws force them to be, but who they truly are. And that truth is darker than anyone expected. Silk Road wasn't just a marketplace, it was a warning that technology had changed power forever. It was digital. Invisible warning that control was no longer physical, untouchable, and irreversible. The question is no longer whether systems like Silk Road exist. The question is, how many exist right now, that no one has found yet? The shutdown of Silk Road did not end the system. It proved that the system worked. Because the moment Silk Road disappeared, something far more dangerous replaced it. Multiple new marketplaces appeared almost instantly. Silk Road was no longer one website, it had become an idea, and ideas cannot be arrested. Within months, new dark web empires began rising. Alphabay, Hansa, Dream Market. These were not small replacements. They were bigger, smarter, and far more dangerous. Alphabay alone had over 400,000 users, more than Amazon had in its early days. Millions of transactions were happening silently. Drugs, weapons, fake identities, access to hacked bank accounts, and services that most people could not even imagine existed. Everything was organized, everything had reviews, everything had ratings, just like a normal online store. Except this store existed outside the law, outside governments, outside control. This was the birth of a parallel economy, an invisible economy, an economy powered by fear, anonymity, and desperation. And at the center of this system was cryptocurrency. Bitcoin was no longer just a digital currency. It had become the fuel of the underground world, because Bitcoin removed the biggest weakness of crime: traceability. For the first time in history, money could move globally without banks, without permission, without identity, without borders. This changed everything, because banks were no longer required, governments were no longer required, control was no longer required. Anyone with internet access could enter this world. Anyone, including ordinary people, teenagers, college students, office workers, people who never imagined they would enter the criminal world. But curiosity is powerful, and Silk Road made crime look normal, easy, safe, professional, and profitable. Vendors were earning thousands of dollars per day. Some were earning millions. Completely anonymously. No office, no employees, no taxes, just a laptop and internet access. This was a new kind of power, digital power, silent power, invisible power. But power always attracts attention, and governments were watching, learning, adapting, because they understood something important. This was not just about drugs, this was about control, financial control, information control, human control, because the dark web proved something dangerous. It proved that governments were no longer the only authority. Technology was becoming the new authority, code was becoming law, and whoever controlled the code controlled the system. Law enforcement agencies began building specialized cyber units. The FBI, CIA, NSA, Europol. They were no longer chasing criminals physically. They were chasing them digitally, through code, through patterns, through behavior, because even anonymous systems leave traces. Tiny mistakes, tiny patterns, tiny weaknesses, and humans always make mistakes. Ross Ulbricht made one mistake, Alphabet's creator made one mistake, every empire eventually makes one mistake, because no system is perfect. But here's the terrifying truth. Even when marketplaces were shut down, the users did not disappear, they simply moved, adapted, evolved. Because the demand never disappeared, and where demand exists, supply always follows. The dark web became stronger, more decentralized, more impossible to destroy, because it was no longer controlled by one person. It was controlled by thousands, millions. Anonymous individuals connected through invisible networks. This was no longer a website. This was an ecosystem, a living system, a system that could survive attacks, survive shutdowns. But what made Silk Road truly powerful was not the technology. It was human nature, human desire, human curiosity, human greed. Because Silk Road did not force anyone to use it. People chose to use it. They entered voluntarily. They explored voluntarily. They participated voluntarily. Because humans are naturally drawn to forbidden things. The more something is hidden, the more attractive it becomes. The more something is restricted, the more valuable it becomes. Because Silk Road was not just a marketplace, it was a community, a hidden society, a digital underground civilization with its own rules, its own currency, its own economy, its own power structure. And this civilization was growing, faster than anyone expected, faster than anyone could control. But every system has vulnerabilities, not technological vulnerabilities, human vulnerabilities. Because technology does not make mistakes. Humans do. Every message, every login, every transaction, every pattern creates data, and data creates identity, even in anonymous systems. Law enforcement agencies understood this. They stopped chasing individuals. They started chasing patterns, behavioral patterns, time patterns, language patterns, connection patterns, because anonymity is not invisibility. It is only concealment, and concealment can be broken, slowly, carefully, patiently. Ross Ulbricht believed he was invisible. He believed Tor protected him, he believed Bitcoin protected him, he believed encryption protected him. But he forgot one thing. He was human, and humans always leave traces. Tiny mistakes. Tiny moments of weakness. Tiny moments of overconfidence. Overconfidence is the most dangerous vulnerability because it makes people careless. It makes them predictable. It makes them exposed. Ross made mistakes in the early days, before Silk Road became powerful, before he became careful, before he understood the scale of what he had created. He used his real email once, he posted on forums once, he revealed small details once, and those small details never disappeared. They remained, waiting, until investigators connected the dots. Because investigations are not fast. They are slow, painfully slow, but they are relentless. Day by day, piece by piece, pattern by pattern, until the invisible becomes visible. And that is exactly what happened. But Silk Road's shutdown did not restore control. It proved something far more dangerous. It proved the system could be bypassed. And once something can be bypassed, it can never be fully controlled again, because knowledge cannot be unlearned. The blueprint was now public. Anyone could recreate it. Anyone could improve it. anyone could expand it. And they did. New marketplaces learned from Silk Road's mistakes. They became more secure, more decentralized, more anonymous. They removed single points of failure. They removed central leadership. They became systems without leaders. Leaderless systems are nearly impossible to destroy because there is no head to cut off, no central brain to attack. This was evolution, digital evolution. The underground economy was adapting, becoming stronger, becoming smarter, becoming invisible. And the scale was enormous. Billions of dollars were moving silently, across borders, across continents, across systems, without banks, without permission, without control. This changed the meaning of money itself, because money was no longer physical. It was no longer controlled by institutions. It was controlled by mathematics, by cryptography, by code. Code replaced trust, code replaced authority, code replaced control. This was the real shift, and governments knew it. This is why cryptocurrency became controversial, not because of crime, but because of independence, because independence threatens centralized power. If people control their own money, they control their own lives. If governments cannot control money, they cannot control behavior. Financial control is the foundation of all control. And Silk Road proved that financial control could be bypassed. This was the real danger. Not drugs, not crime, but freedom from financial surveillance. Because traditional banking systems monitor everything. Every transaction, every transfer, every movement. Banks see everything, governments see everything. But Silk Road created a system they could not easily see. This created fear. Institutional fear. Because power was slipping, slowly, silently, irreversibly. But here is the paradox. Silk Road was both dangerous and revolutionary. It exposed weaknesses in centralized systems. It exposed the fragility of trust. It exposed the illusion of control. Because control only exists when people believe it exists. Once belief disappears, control disappears. This is why Silk Road mattered. Not because of what it sold, but because of what it proved. It proved systems could be challenged. It proved authority could be bypassed. It proved individuals could become powerful. Powerful enough to disrupt global systems, from a laptop, from a bedroom, from anonymity. This changed everything, because the future was no longer controlled only by institutions. It was controlled by individuals who understood technology, understood systems, understood human psychology. Because technology amplifies individual power. One person can now reach millions. One person can now move millions. One person can now disrupt millions. This was impossible before the internet, impossible before encryption, impossible before cryptocurrency. But now it was reality, and reality cannot be undone. Silk Road was not an ending, it was a beginning, the beginning of a new era, an era where systems compete with code, an era where authority competes with anonymity, an era where control competes with freedom, and this conflict is still happening today, silently, behind screens, behind code, behind systems most people never see. Because the most powerful systems are the ones people do not realize exist. And in the end, the Silk Road was never just about one website. It was never just about one man. It was never just about crime. It was about something far bigger, something far deeper, something far more permanent. It was about the moment humanity crossed an invisible line. For the first time in history, power was no longer tied to physical force. It was tied to knowledge, to code, to understanding systems better than the people who created them. For centuries, power belonged to governments, banks, and institutions. Because they controlled the infrastructure. They controlled money, they controlled access, they controlled opportunity. But Silk Road proved something that terrified those institutions. It proved that infrastructure could be recreated digitally. It proved that money could exist outside banks. It proved that markets could exist outside governments. It proved that control was not absolute, only assumed. And assumptions can be broken. Ross Ulbricht was not a king, he was not a politician, he was not a billionaire. He was just a person with an idea an idea that systems could be redesigned, and that idea became reality. For nearly 3 years, Silk Road operated in plain sight, hidden behind layers of anonymity, thousands of users, millions of transactions, hundreds of millions of dollars, all moving silently, unseen by the traditional financial system. This was not supposed to be possible, but it was happening. Right under the surface of the internet, and even after Silk Road was shut down, the idea survived, because ideas cannot be arrested, ideas cannot be imprisoned, ideas cannot be destroyed. Once an idea enters the world, it spreads, it evolves, it adapts, and it grows stronger. Today, the technologies that Silk Road used still exist. Tor still exists, cryptocurrency still exists, encryption still exists, and more importantly, the knowledge still exists. Millions of people now understand that alternative systems are possible, that independence is possible, that anonymity is possible. This has permanently changed the balance of power, because now control is no longer guaranteed, it must be maintained, it must be defended, it must constantly evolve. But there is another side to this story, a darker truth, because tools themselves are neutral. Technology is neutral. It does not care about morality, it does not care about legality, it only cares about function. The same technology that creates freedom can also create chaos. The same anonymity that protects privacy can also protect crime. The same independence that empowers individuals can also weaken safeguards. This is the paradox of technological evolution. Every advancement creates both opportunity and risk. Every innovation creates both freedom and danger. Silk Road was simply the first major example of this new reality. A reality where individuals could operate beyond traditional boundaries. A reality where systems could be challenged. A reality where control was no longer centralized. And this reality is still unfolding, right now, all around you. Most people will never see it, because it exists beneath the surface, in code, in networks, in encrypted systems, quietly shaping the future. The world is changing, not loudly, not visibly, but silently, system by system, layer by layer. And the most important question is not whether this change will continue, because it will. The real question is, who will understand it? Who will adapt to it? And who will be left behind? Because history has always been shaped by those who understood systems, those who saw what others could not see, those who recognized change before it became obvious. Silk Road was not just a marketplace, it was a signal that the age of centralized control was no longer absolute, a signal that technology had shifted the balance, a signal that the future would belong to those who understand how systems truly work. And that future has already begun.